everyone, to the HR in Action podcast. We have a guest here today, Susannah Robinson, who we're going to talk to. She is the president and founder of Partnership for Talent, and we've got a whole bunch of different HR topics I think we're going to talk about related to her work and years of experience doing various HR roles. And so I'm excited to just dive in. So let's jump right into it, and I'll turn it over to you, Susannah, if you don't mind kind of just starting off and telling us a little bit about yourself and doing a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. First, Aaron, thanks so much for having me. I love to do this type of thing, and it's super exciting to talk to people about what we do and people who are engaged and super excited about helping teams and helping leaders and employees. It's always fun to me.
For sure.
So, I started Partnership for Talent about 5 years ago, and I had spent 20 years in big corporate America. I had done pretty much every job there was to do in HR, plus a little bit of a stint in a chemical business as a business leader and a little bit of a rotation in investor relations. And then I was lucky enough to have the chance to go support as the chief HR officer a sort of mid-sized nonprofit. And what I realized at the time when I got there was medium-sized and small companies needed really good HR, strategic HR all the way to the ground.
Sure.
They just usually didn't need it all the time, and they couldn't afford it. And so when I left there after 5 years, we had built a really great HR team and had them in a good space. I went and started my own practice. And we exclusively support small and medium-sized businesses. That's all we do. I don't support the big guys. And what we're able to do is take really great best practice and size it for small or medium-sized companies. Because we find is small companies and medium companies, they're not just like size down big companies. You have to change things and you have to think about things differently. When I've got a startup of 6 people, it looks different than 5,000 people, right? And so we have the opportunity to really help startups really grow, help small businesses get to a place where we need to hire them a full-time HR person, help a medium-sized company who's never had an HR team unravel some of the ravel that they have created and really get themselves into a place where managers can focus on running the business and managers can focus on helping their teams be successful. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And when you and I had talked last, we had a great conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. No, I remember when I was moved into this HR role and my first HR role, I was running HR for this small business, and we were growing and we were hiring what we called an employee ambassador. Really, it was, almost an onboarding specialist, but we wanted it to be more than that because, as you know, in a small business, you can't just do one thing. There's not enough work for one thing. You get to do lots of things, which I've always liked, and I've always been in small business, except for the government, which is like the biggest business there is. But I remember that I was interviewing this lady, and she was coming from IBM, and she was telling me about her experience she was an onboarding specialist. I think they even called it an employee ambassador. She's like, oh yeah, well we'd have about 80 or 90 new hires per week. And I'm thinking to myself, we don't hire that many people we haven't hired that many people the last 3 years, right?
Exactly.
We were a couple hundred employees at the time. So probably mid-size, I guess you could call us mid-size. In the government, we're still considered small, but just like considering that scope, right? Yeah. And it's like that when you're doing that, it's a totally different job.
It's a totally different job. It's funny. I was literally today just talking to a CEO, and we were thinking about what the goals were for this quarter, and they were a team of 17 right now, and we're hiring 3 new positions. And
Which
she's
is
like,
huge
that's like
for them. That's huge.
That's huge for us.
Yeah.
And I said, Jan, I think, she said, I want to make sure that we're thinking about how we bring them into the culture of the company. And I said, well, if I walked onto the elevator with you and I was interested in your job and I said, tell me about the culture of the company, what would you tell me? And so she rattled off all of these things. Then I said, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. A, would your rest of your executive team say the same thing? And B, is that the culture of the company, or that's the culture you want the company to be? And she said, oh, that's a really good question. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think we need to do some work around how you only have 17 people. How do we get all your team engaged in onboarding these new people? Because when you're interviewing for a job, you're focused on sort of, can I see myself at that company? And the interviewing process and that selection process is when people sort of have to earn their way into the company. The day you hire them, they don't have to earn their way in anymore. It's now our job to make them feel welcome. And so our job is to make them feel like they belong. And how do we get, when you only have 17 people, how do you get all of them engaged in making people feel like they belong? Yeah. Which is not at all the way that somebody's got 5,000 people thinks about onboarding an employee.
No. And it's, it's interesting because it's culture from that perspective, right, is so important in both, I think, in a large company and a small company. But a large company, you've got this base, this momentum. So changing a culture is really, really challenging. But on the small business side, you've got 3 people. That's, like you said, that's, a 10% growth in the organization. You could very quickly start to lose your culture that you started with just from a few hires, because you are changing, a few people changes by a big percentage. And if you're not selecting in the right way and you're not having that defined, that's when I think companies like Tony Shea from Zappos, where he talked about in his book, in his first company, he looked around one day and realized like he didn't even like working there anymore. They'd hired the best and the brightest, but they didn't hire from at all consider culture. Right. And he looks around one day and he doesn't even know the company that he's working for anymore.
And it's all about intentionality, right? It's just being intentional, because you may choose to use those opportunities to change your culture, right? We've done that with companies before where they say it's not going exactly where they want, and so we're hiring slightly off from where the culture currently is to try to move it back. Or I hire one key leader who I know thinks differently, and I said, okay, people are either going to learn to think that way, or they're going to say this isn't really where I want to be anymore, and that's okay too. Right. And so it's being intentional about how you're hiring and how you're onboarding people and how you're thinking about your culture.
Oh, yeah. No, that's super important. So what kind of stuff are you doing? What are some of the best practices that you're working with these companies to help them from this cultural perspective to define it?
I would say a few things, right? I would say one of the things that we do when we try to think about how are we thinking about an onboarding program, a corporate onboarding, company onboarding program, not a job training program for making sure this engineer knows the things they need to know.
Yeah.
But I go out and I talk to the current employees and say, what was your onboarding experience like, right? Yeah. What went well? What really didn't go well? What did you wish you had known? Yeah. And it's sometimes, I was telling the CEO, I said, sometimes it's silly things, right? Is if you're hiring a new employee, I shouldn't have to sit there and try to watch every other woman in the room to try to figure out where they go to the ladies' room, right? Somebody should show me where that is. Somebody should show me where to put my lunch, right? As opposed to me having to ask, it feels different, right? If you're the CEO and you only have 17 people, I kind of hope you're going to go spend an hour with the person. When we all go out to lunch on Wednesday, we all look around and go, well, where's Steve? He's the new guy. Did somebody not invite Steve? No one invited Steve, and now Steve's sitting by himself in the office, right? And so it's helping them think through what are the things that you take for granted, right? And asking people what their experience is and literally creating a flow of who's doing what, right? I don't need 7 people telling the person where to put their lunch, but I do need someone charged with that, right? Sure. I need someone charged with making sure that every day for the first 4 weeks, you're the one who asks him to go to lunch when everyone's going to lunch, right? And it makes the rest of the team feel like they have a stake in this person's success too.
Of course. Do you do any kind of like formal assignments? That was in one of the companies we had. We started to have I forget what we called it, but it was like an onboarding, mentor almost. Yeah. Where we partnered. We made sure every new hire had somebody partnered with that they could go to if there wasn't anyone else around to ask questions. Is that something you
Yeah, we always did. We always do a formal flow. We oftentimes do a mentor piece, because usually the only person you know is either your manager, and you don't always want to go to them, or the HR person, right? And the HR person ends up when they're offsite and we're offsite. Right. You can't necessarily just drop in their office, and so we try to buddy them with someone in the organization who's willing to do the job, right? I don't like to give that job to someone who doesn't really feel comfortable doing it, but willing to do that job and help be the person that you can go to and say, okay, I have a really silly question, because it's probably not a silly question. Right. It's just a question that you actually have. So, But we do lay out, because we work with such small companies, we do lay out, here's what that onboarding needs to look like, and here's who's responsible for what things. Yeah. And literally go and chase them down and make sure people are doing them. So,
but have you ever been surprised by? So you go around to employees and you're asking about their onboarding experience. I gotta assume, like, every company's unique, but are there certain trends you found that you've been able to incorporate, or any surprises that it's like, wow, I didn't think that was going to be something they remember? And
yeah, exactly. I'm always surprised when they say, hey, it was really great because XYZ person wandered over and introduced themselves. And then they came back the second day and introduced themselves again because they knew I met 30 people yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the one thing we hear from a lot of new employees is, I met so many people on the first day that I couldn't remember their names.
Yeah.
And so it's when people share feedback that something went well that I'm always pleasantly surprised. I suppose it shouldn't be surprising, but it's always nice to hear that, oh, it actually worked.
Right.
Because people decide in the first 2 weeks whether they're going to stay long-term in a company. It's that fast of a decision.
If not faster, even.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, those first impressions are powerful. Even during the interview process, that can be very powerful.
And we do a lot of training when we train leaders. So we do sort of leadership training for new managers and new leaders, and even leaders who've done this for a while. And it is one of the things we tell people when they're interviewing is, look, it's your job to sell yourself, to sell the company, to help them see what it looks like there. And there are silly things that no one thinks about, right? My name gets ruined on any given day, and when you get passed through an interview to 4 people and they've all said your name wrong, that doesn't always go well, right? And so sometimes it's okay to ask. If you don't know how to say it, it's okay to ask, so that when you introduce them to the next person, you've got it right. And so sometimes managers are like, oh, I didn't really think about that. I'm like, it's the little things that people pick up on because you're trying to make them feel welcomed, right?
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. So yeah, and from the HR work in small businesses, the other thing that I've noticed is that there's a difference. Maybe it depends on the company, but for us, it was always a different relationship with HR than what I would hear from like large companies, right? There's an issue, you go to HR or something. But in the small companies that I worked in, you usually go to your supervisor first. So I think there was more of a responsibility for leaders in small companies where they have to kind of pull more weight when it comes to those relationships and helping with some of those things. Obviously, you wouldn't want them trying to navigate a sexual harassment claim, by themselves. They should go to their HR team, assuming that they have one. But I'm curious what you found in that area.
We do, and we actually work with our clients exactly that way. I'm contrary to what a lot of people would like to hear is I believe that HR is the support function to the business, and I don't think that's a weak position. It's our job to help managers be able to work with their teams, right? I'm not there every day. I can't be in charge of every single person in the organization, right? That's what leader's job is. And it's my job to make sure that they feel comfortable with that. It's my job to make sure I make them feel a little uncomfortable and more comfortable with being uncomfortable, but that they feel like they have the skills to do it. And that it's what we train leaders in our training program is our job is to make sure you feel more confident in doing it. And that when you don't, you have a partner to call to say, look, I need to have this uncomfortable conversation. Can I bounce this around with you for a little bit? Can I role play it with you? Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do when they cry, right? Those kinds of things that so that leaders don't want to do those things. I don't think any person comes to work saying, I'd really like to do a crappy job today. Sure. And any leader comes and says, really, I'd like to kind of be mean to my team today. They don't do that. And so it's making it so that it all sort of flows together and that the leaders feel empowered. The way I describe it to the leaders that I work with and the CEOs, I said, look, I have an opinion on all things. Just ask me. I said, and I'm going to give you every reason in the world that we're going to go to the left. And when you tell me that's amazing, I'm the CEO, we're going to the right. It's my job to help you make right successful. When right falls down, we're all going to go back to the left again, and it's going to be just fine. But it's not the one making your business decisions. And I'm not the one getting to decide if Roger stays or goes, right? It's my job to say you can make any decision you want, but here are the first, second, and third level consequences to making that decision. So let's talk it through and figure out what's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So you've been at large companies, right, and doing HR, and now you're working more with small. Is that kind of how you've seen it as well? That like, because in a large company, and I had this experience, I think when I was actually interviewing with a large company, but the HR people took care of like everything, right?
Sure.
Basically, the tech person came in to do a tech interview and gave their say, but then HR did the salary negotiations, HR did the onboarding, they did all that, and basically they just kind of hand you this person. And so then it creates this, I think, relationship where if there's personnel issues, the leader feels like, all right, well, I'm just going to pass that over to HR. That's not my problem. I'm focused on the technical work to get the technical done. You got this, whatever problem, you go talk to HR about it. But I like that, what you're saying is, no, we're here to help the leader do that stuff. We're not here to do it for them. Right. We're not here to be the leader.
For a lot of people, we've worked with a couple of sort of more larger, medium-sized companies, I'd say, where there were HR people who they literally did everything.
Wow.
And when they left, and the next person came in, and they
lost, right?
The mindset. All the managers like, I don't know what to do now. What do I do now? I never had to do any of that.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, we're going to teach you how to do that. That's okay, right? But they feel much more empowered that they have a say and that they have a connection with the people who work on their team.
Of course,
right?
This is important.
They should feel connected, and they should feel, the way I always tell my team is, look, leading your team's a lot like raising your kids, right? As you love them to death, right? You set some guidelines for them, but it's your job to help mold them into good people, and it's your job to help mold your employees into good, high-performing people, and you love them to death, right? That's great. But it's also my job to help you understand sort of, okay, how do I give you the tools to do that, right? And how do I help you when you're struggling and support you when you make a decision, right? So it may not be the decision I would have made, but as long as we're not breaking the law, right? Which everybody sort of couches it in, it's against the law. The laws are pretty broad, right? And a lot of these are personal style preferences versus substance preferences. And it's got to look and feel like you. The team you lead will look and feel different than the team I lead. And that's okay, right? People will gravitate to the type of leader that's most appropriate for them. It's the reason people work for Microsoft versus Apple, right? It just feels different.
Right. So you mentioned role play, which is a big thing for me, and that's the tool that I built. What in terms of leadership development, what are some of the things that have been most effective when you're working? Is it like classes and certain topics that you're doing in programs and workshops, or is it more like one-on-one coaching and mentoring, or sort of a combination? I'm curious.
We do both. I think you and I may have talked about this when we talked last time. So we run a leadership training and coaching program, right? So I'm a huge believer you need to blend the two, right? You need to blend the combination of learning the fundamentals and then the opportunity to play with it and test it
practice
in a safe environment, right? And that to me is where the coaching comes in. That's where your tool is fabulous, because you get to play with it and test it. Like, okay, I want to think about, how do I say this, right? And then I want to be able to rewind it and go, okay, I don't want to say it that way. That's not what I meant to come out. I want to try it again, right? And that ability to do that in a safe space and get feedback on that is huge. It's huge for people, because I mean, I can't tell you, we get emails every once in a while that said, thank you so much. It went so much better than I thought it was going to. And so much better than it would have if I didn't have that chance to bounce it around.
Yeah. I have I think one of my favorite stories when I was an early supervisor, and I had to talk to someone about their attire. They were dressed inappropriately at a government site, and I wish I'd have had my tool to practice, and I didn't do role play. Our HR was off on the other side of the country, and I had a long phone call with our HR person, and they're like, no, I trust you. You can go in and you can have that conversation yourself. I was like, I don't need like a buddy to it's like, okay. And man, I must have run through that in my head, 15, 20 times before I went and had the conversation. And then of course it still didn't go the way that I had thought. Right.
That's right.
And so being able to role play that with somebody or an AI, whatever it is practicing that stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes when being the HR partner is, and I truly believe there's a reason we called it Partnership for Talent. I really believe it's our job to be a partner. And part of listening to someone say, are you sure you don't want to be on the call with me? what I'm hearing underneath is I need the support, right? And sometimes it's, okay, you just want me on the phone so when it goes off the track, we can help guide it back on the track. Or you feel more comfortable that they're not gonna let me go too far off the track, right? And so I think it's being able to know your clients and your partners well enough to know when Abby says, I need you on the call, or are you sure you don't want to be on the call? That means Abby's feeling unsure, right? And so how do I help her and support her to feel more confident? Because once she does it once, the next time she's going to feel more confident to do it again.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
If you allow it to turn into a dumpster fire, she's not going to feel confident again, because now she's going to say, well, I couldn't do it last time. What makes me think I'm going to be able to do it this time?
Yeah. Well, and we can't expect all the leaders to become experts in all the laws and things like that. But if you're so overwhelmed with the thought of I don't know, I think in interviews, you don't want to also scare someone into where they're asking questions and then they're having to think oh, wait, am I allowed to say that? Or am I not? Is that too this or that? It's got to become just a skill and you kind of, it. But if you're having those good conversations in the front end and doing them quickly and well and building good relationship, you shouldn't have to get to a point where you need HR in there to make sure you're following the law and dealing with whatever harassment claims and things like that. That's ideally you avoid that stuff before it even happens.
Ideally you avoid that stuff, that we haven't gotten to that space. And so to me, it's a lot of it's making sure you give people the help and support that they need, so that the way I describe it to people is, look, it's my job to stand next to you and hold your hand and help you do it till you get brave enough to do it for yourself.
Of course. Yeah. So when you're doing leadership workshops and stuff, are there particular skills you're focusing on, and or what are the kind of some of the biggest areas of lacking where you're seeing that people need the most support?
Some of what we focus on, so we focus on, talent selection and recruiting and those performance management and the sort of the blocking and tackling basics. But the parts of the sessions that I really love are when we focus on two things. One is your leadership vision, right? I find that a lot of leaders, be they new leaders or older, leaders that have done this for a long time, haven't really thought about what is the type of leader I want to be, right? I used to stand up in front of large groups of people, and my team will tell you, I carried around this pink book. And in the front of my pink notebook, there was this ratty-tatty piece of paper that was my leadership vision. This was who I wanted to be as a leader.
Awesome.
And I shared it broadly with my team. But I think, guys, this is what I'm trying to show up for you every day as. I guarantee you on every given day, by the end of the day, I will not have been this. But every day I get to start again and try to be that. And so helping leaders think through who is it that I want to be as a type of leader, right? What quotes and words and approaches have inspired me, and how do I want to think about that? And really writing it down and committing it to a piece of paper so that you can add to it and take off from it and change it, so that you think about, who do I want to be as a leader, right? So I can describe to my team, here's who I am and here's who I'm not.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that we really focus a lot on, that I believe is really impactful as a leader, is intent versus impact. And so as you move up in leadership, your intent and your intention becomes less and less important, and it becomes incumbent on you to manage your impact on people. And so we do a lot of work around behavioral assessments and how do you sort of show up as a leader? How do I communicate? What type of style do I have, so that I can learn to manage my impact better with my team? So that the example I always give is one of the last teams that I led at one of the big companies, we did, I don't know if you've ever used DISC.
Oh, of course.
But we did.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I sit about as far out on the dominant conscientious side as one could be, like way out on the side. So
you're
it
like a
means
DC?
DC. So done, fast, perfect. That's sort of me.
Okay.
The entire team I led were all what they called S's and I's. So people who liked stability, people who liked personal connection, those types of things. I always do Monday morning huddles with my team. So we'd get there Monday morning. And if you asked me, the first thing we should do is let's get to the spreadsheet. Let's figure out what the objectives are for this week. Let's figure out what we're going to do. Let's figure out why we didn't make it last week. And let's be better this week.
Yeah.
And if you ask them, they wanted to talk about, how was your weekend? What kind of wine did I try? How was the puppy growing? And that stuff just wasn't necessary for me.
Yeah.
However, it was necessary for my team.
Right.
And when I drove them to be like me, the impact on them was, well, you don't care about me. You don't care about how my weekend was. You don't care that I need this connection and to feel stable before I get to this. And so when we did some of that work, it became really clear that there was this dichotomy of the leader versus the rest of the team.
Yeah, light bulbs start going off, right?
I changed the meeting. So we spent the first 10 minutes talking about, how was your weekend? What kind of wine did you try? How was the puppy growing? And about 10 minutes in, everyone looked and said, Susanna's D is dying. We need to get to the spreadsheet now. And that team accomplished way more than they ever thought they could. They hit all of their objectives. They got the biggest bonuses they'd ever gotten. And they looked at each other and said, we didn't think we could do it. And I said, well, I knew you could do it. But a lot of it had to do with me managing my impact on the team and recognizing what they needed from me as a leader. And so we spend a lot of time helping leaders understand how they show up for their team, how they communicate, and thinking about how that impacts their team.
Yeah.
And how do they want to manage that impact versus how are they intending? I wasn't intending to make my team feel untethered and pushed. I was intending for everybody to achieve objectives. The impact was very different. And when I started managing my impact versus focusing on my intent, we got a lot more done.
Sure. No, that's great. I mean, fundamentally, and we say in leadership in context is you start with yourself. You have to look inside. If you don't know yourself, you can't be a good leader. And it's disposition and values. So like that first thing, I'm curious, you had your little kind of credo or your intentions of what you wanted as a leader. Was that like value words or was it behaviors? What kind of is that?
It's a little bit of all things, right? Yeah. So, when you look at yourself as a leader, I believe that I should take a little more than my share of the blame and a little less than my share of the credit, right? I believe that the speed of the boss is the speed of the team. I run really fast. Everybody else will run really fast. I believe that it is... you need to have the courage to be kind, right? I believe that you need to be calm and confident, right? I also believe that empathy is at the heart of a team, right? So there are sort of a blend of things for me that are, and it comes from all different things, right? The courage to be kind comes from a Cinderella movie, right? The calm, confident piece comes from Cesar Rivera, whoever the dog trainer is, right? It comes from all over the place. And it's just how I think about the type of leader I want to be. But what I have found for me is it's a really good tool to use with my team to say, look, this is what it means to be on a Susannah Robinson team, right? This is what it means to me. And here's what I'm trying to show up for you every day as. If I'm not doing that for you, I'd like you to call me on it, right? I'd like you to kind of close the door first, but I'd like you to call me on it. And what it does is it gives them the understanding that I'm always working on things too. They're not the only ones. Everybody's got their things to work on. And it gives them the permission to provide feedback to their leader, right? Which is always challenging to figure out, how am I going to deliver this message to her that she's not doing this right now, right? And I think that it gives permission to do that.
Yeah, no, so, I mean, I would call those values. I believe, this is how I should act, or this is how we should act, or this is how we should interact. And it gets, to that behavioral level of what does it actually mean in action and not just some word. Like, I believe in honesty, right? No. What does that actually mean? It means that I'm going to do this or do that or always do this or never do that. No, that's great. And you create that's almost as like at a team level, and it sets the expectation.
It sticks with people. Most of the people on my team worked for me on a different team before, right? So they have come to join me on this team, but they've worked for me before. And when I listen to them do our leadership training, they will tell my Pink Book story. They'll be like, oh, I remember her very distinctly standing up and sharing this with a group of 50 people. Yeah. Right? That was 15 years ago that happened, right? And it sticks with people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we call it prepare is first understanding your own values and disposition, and then you share what you want it to be for the team, right? And that can be driven by the leader. It can be a collaborative thing because there's probably also, like you said, you start to adapt as you understand the team members' disposition. And yeah, I gotta now, I'm questioning myself. Maybe I did too much small talk with you in the beginning before we started this podcast. It's like, if you're in DC, you want to get right to it.
I have learned in my career to be more S than I like.
I'm not an I. I'm more of a CS. Although I'm like a CSI. I'm very kind of middle road. I think I've learned over the years.
Well, you're an engineer, so you have to be C. There's got to be some
the CME is that's how I started as an engineer. But I've moved into the project management leadership, and now the HR side. So, but definitely.
And Aaron, I think. I come from I'm a chemist, right? So I come from a science background. I honestly believe that some of the best HR people in the world have come from other places than HR, right? They have had these broad business backgrounds because you become the business person at the table whose function just happens to be HR, right? And you get to, you can participate in a conversation about the technology, and you can participate in a conversation about the business, and you can participate in a commercial conversation. Your specialty just happens to be HR.
Sure. Well, and I mean, when I got in, that was the reason was I had the ops background, right? So I could think from an ops perspective. That's the job of HR, is to support operations. Everyone in a company, we're trying to support operations, but with a people focus.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I love it, and the disposition stuff I think is so critical. And when you're talking about leading a team and understanding that example, that's great, of adjusting and adding that small talk into the team, because that's what they needed, right? And it's true that especially in right, they want to talk about that stuff.
They want to feel connected, but it has to be genuine commitment from the leader, right? It can't be okay, I'm just going to do the small talk just to do the small talk. It has to be a genuine. Okay, I'm going to ask you how your weekend was, and I'm going to listen to what you said, and as opposed to. No, I'm going to do the small talk just so I can get to my thing, right?
That's true. If it's, no different than like a conversation, people know if you're not actually listening, or if you don't care, if it's not genuine. Yep. So you have to actually okay, let's do your small talk. I'm not really, all right, can we get down to business now? All right, we're done with that. Yeah, it can't be like that for sure. I have an old colleague where we were both, more process oriented. We would always just jump right into it. And at one point she's like, should we be doing small talk before? Maybe we need to add some small talk before we start our conversation. So we would, but it turned into something, sincere. We'd get to know each other a little better. But, I like Simon Sinek says, stop saying work is like a family. It is a family. And I don't necessarily, he's on the extreme side, I think, a little bit in some of those things, but I do believe you have to get to know the people that you're working with and leading, because you have to understand them as a human, as a person.
It also allows you to provide people a little bit of grace when they misstep, because every one of us is going to misstep, and if we have that connection, I can provide you the grace to say, okay, they're having a bad day, or this is a really touchy subject for them, right? As opposed to assuming some ill intent behind it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So assuming good intent is one of my core, value things that I always add in and talk to organizations about, because it's a huge problem. And especially with COVID, the more we're separated from people, and I saw this in myself when I was working with people on, cross coast. I'm in California. We had a lot of people in DC and areas there, is that when you're only emailing or even maybe talking on the phone, and then something goes wrong or somebody says something and you don't like it, it's so much easier to start just putting it aside as just a resource and start blaming them and making all these assumptions. That I started figuring out, you got to catch yourself on that stuff, and just an in-person or even a video chat, I think, can make such a massive difference to put you back and kind of click your brain back of oh wait, hold on, this is a human too, and they don't have negative intentions. They're not trying to do a bad job or trying to piss me off.
Right. And it also it helps you sort of get to know people a little bit, so that when you're on a video conference of 6 or 7 people, and I was on one last week, and the the head of the commercial team was doing their presentation and saying something. He said, wait, stop. Susanna's making the face. So he said, you're making the face. What's the matter? Right. And so we know each other well enough that he can say, okay, she's not getting it. She's not agreeing with it. There's something. She's making the face. Right. So how do we stop and figure out what that is? And it allows you, we've worked in global organizations for 25 years, but you always had someone on a phone, or you didn't get to see them. You had to see them a couple of times a year. The video piece made an enormous difference in people's ability to work remotely and stay connected and create those engagements that you didn't always afford to have.
As long as they use the video, right?
As long as they use the video. Yeah, most of my teams use the video.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. Very good. Well, we're already coming up on time, actually. Unfortunately, I'd love to keep talking. But I want to give you also some time to just kind of plug your organization and, maybe share how people can get in touch with you. I don't know if you're taking new clients right now or anything, but if you want to...
what I always say to people is we are always taking new clients, right? My team, I'm shocked. I started this 5 years. It's funny. I was talking to my daughter and I was saying something that it was a little crazy. And she said, Mom, you need to step back for a second. She said, I remember 5 years ago when you started this thing, you weren't sure it was going to last a year. She's like, and now you've hired 4 people and you have all these clients. And so quit telling me it's not going to work. And so I always tell people we're always taking new clients because I just keep her on my team to help support it. There's, to me, small and medium-sized companies have a really big need and they need that support. And so I love what we do. Partnership for Talent is very focused on supporting HR needs within small and medium-sized companies. And so our website is www.partnershipfortalent.com. We are on LinkedIn, and so you can get us there. We do obviously do leadership training for cohorts and groups, and we'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in understanding what we do. So
awesome! And did you write a book?
I did write a book. Yes, I wrote a book that is called Beyond the Boxes and Lines. It is an organizational development book, an organizational design book. I teach organizational design at the master's level.
Oh, cool.
And so when I taught the first class, I used somebody else's old textbook. And I was like, this is it's horrible. It's like one of those really theoretical textbooks, kind of like you read those and you're like, oh yeah, none of this will work in real life. And so the first class I taught without somebody else's materials, I taught without a book. And I said, okay, guys, we're gonna try this without a book. And at the end, I'm going to ask you how it went. And so I got to the end and they said, we didn't miss the book at all. And I wish I could just carry your notes around in my pocket and you should write the book.
Nice.
And so I did. And so it's just of a primer on org design and how to think about not just the little squares on the paper, but how does organizational design play into the design of the jobs and the structure and the employee practices? And how do those all come together to make really robust organizations? So it was a lot of fun to write. And a lot of people use it as sort of this primer on how do I think about what needs to get set up in my company to make it successful.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. I'm working with a client right now on an organizational structure and trying to balance an agile, safe process and mission alignment and all these different things. So maybe I'll have to pick your brain on that.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That stuff is super fun.
Very good. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on and chatting.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Definitely.
As we keep doing these. So very good. Well, thanks again.
Excellent. Thanks. I appreciate it.